Logan, let's go ahead and put your model up on the screen here so we can see what it is saying about where things stand. You can talk us through. You've got Kamala Harris at a 58.3% chance to win on November 5th. Donald Trump at 41.4% chance. That is still really quite close, but with Kamala Harris having a bit of an edge. Based on the latest polling, have you seen much of a shift here? And if so, in which direction?
Yeah, I would say, again, post-debate, just a slight
little bit
shift back in Trump's direction. Although some of this stuff, day to day can be noise. Like you had the New York Times, you had Alice. These are two pollsters with great track records that consistently lean to the right. And so sometimes it's just a matter of who spoke last. It's going to change this model.
Yeah.
But, you never knew exactly if this rise was going to continue for Harris. I think the Trump assassination attempt, I don't know if it necessarily brought people back to him, but it kind of quieted Harris's second best news cycle of the entire election, other than when she first became.
It sort of stopped her post-debate momentum.
Exactly. So it might have slowed things down for her. Where who knows, maybe she continues to rise to a new level.
And where are we seeing, we just had obviously the Battleground states, blue wall states, but what about Sunbelt states? What are we seeing for Harris? We're looking at Arizona, we're looking at Georgia. What's that looked like post-debate?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Harris definitely gained in the more northern swing states after the debate. The car was kind of parked in the Sun Belt. In some states, there might have been some slight slippage, like Arizona and Georgia. So Arizona, more than any of the others, appears to be moving a little bit more to the right. North Carolina is as close as ever, continues to be roughly tied. Georgia, she's down by a half point to a point. But Nevada's been an exception. That is a state where she continues to get stronger. And so I think Nevada's kind of moved into the same tier as Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. They're all kind of around, in my model, 60 to 70% chance for Harris to win.
And that's what, 6 electoral votes, Nevada?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
I saw Nate Cohn opining this morning that we may be in a period where we're getting kind of the most accurate read of the race so far, because you haven't had anything massively tumultuous in political terms. We didn't have a debate. We didn't have an assassination attempt. We didn't have a candidate being switched out. And so he was indicating that where the polls are right now, with basically her having about a 3-point lead in the national popular vote margin, which translates into a very narrow lead for her in terms of electoral college, maybe actually the best picture of the race that we've had so far. And the other thing that's remarkable to me is, in spite of all of this crazy political turmoil and news cycles, the race has been fairly stable. It has never ranged that far out of what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, especially once Harris kind of built her momentum, won people over, and she was just in a better place than Joe Biden was. But from that point on, yeah, it's been relatively steady. I think the biggest shift has been in the Midwest and Pennsylvania, especially Pennsylvania, where, it's still really close, but she's in a stronger place than she started.
Interesting.
And Trump is rallying in Butler this weekend, interestingly enough. So let's then talk about how, with all of that happening, the sort of car being parked in these different places, what is the Harris campaign right now? Or let's say, let me put it this way. I'm turning into Kamala Harris myself, actually, as I try to ask this question. That's her favorite thing to do. But basically, what could happen from now until Election Day, given what Harry Enten has said, in the polling at least, that if you look back and correct for 16, 20, the polling right now could be way more favorable to Trump, or we could look back on it and say Trump actually had an extra 2 to 3 points if we were to look at the polling now and correct it. Does that make sense? Harry Enten has said if you look at the polling now, you compare what happened in 16 and 20, you could basically add 2 to 3 points for him nationally. Is there something to that?
I would say, and I suspect Harry would agree, that it's worthy thinking about that in terms of having a healthy dose of skepticism about the polls, because it's just harder to poll these days now that people respond to phone calls less. But it can miss either way. This is a capitalist industry, right? So pollsters will have it'll be a horrible day for their industry if we have another 2020 or 2016. They're going to make less money. So they'd really like to not miss, and seriously underrate Donald Trump again. They've been trying hard to make shifts. Whether they succeed or not, we're going to see. I think it could also be that they do an overcorrection and miss the other way.
Okay.
So I would say we shouldn't go in and assuming a miss in either way. Just remember that it could happen.
Yeah.
And if it's a miss in Harris's direction, as in she's underrated, then she's gonna win, unless, the polls dip by the time we get to Election Day. And if it's a 2-point miss, Harris could definitely win with that. Because it's not gonna be consistent in every state. If it's a 4-point miss, she's gonna be in trouble.
Interesting.
Yeah. You seeing anything out of the early vote data that's interesting to you?
Almost every single cycle, when we look at the early vote, it ends up leading us astray. I heard so many
Yeah, I
great
know.
things about Clinton in 2016 and how she was killing it in Florida. And in Miami, that was true, but she was doing so bad further up north. I think
But
almost
it's on a
everyone...
different scale now, right? Like you hear the Trump campaign, the Vance campaign just over the weekend, Vance telling people to go out and vote early. It's probably a somewhat different makeup of people voting early this time around too.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why it's hard to read into. I mean, also, mail-in voting is definitely going to be down, and people can panic about that for Dem side, but of course it's going to be down. We're not in the coronavirus pandemic anymore, and voters aren't scared to go to the polls. And so a lot more Dems are going to show up on Election Day, and Trump isn't warning people about the evils of mail-in voting anymore most of the time. And so his voters are going to go more to vote by mail, which in some states they used to do a lot more than Dems, like Florida. So maybe we're getting a little bit closer to where it used to be.
Interesting. All right, Logan, great to see you. Thank you so much for coming in
to see you
and
too.
sharing your knowledge with us. We appreciate it.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.